Happy Friday and Merry Christmas, folks. Senior Editor Mackenzie Taylor here, and welcome back to the Texan's weekly Roundup podcast. This week, our team discusses the CEO of ERCOT asserting that the power grid is prepared for coming winter weather. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts staying the decision to end Title 42. The state of Texas withdrawing its appeal from a court ruling that adults under 21 can carry handguns. A federal judge invalidating Homeland Security's termination of Remain in Mexico. Senator Ted Cruz holding nominations to secure natural gas export permits. Senator John Cornyn casting doubt on invasion rhetoric concerning the southern border. A state legislator filing a Hyde Amendment for gender modification. State Senator Roland Gutierrez filing a bill to require active shooting training for all law enforcement. A Texas representative filing a ban on university diversity, equity, and inclusion offices. Republicans' criticisms of the omnibus spending bill for its limits on border security funding, the Karnes County Sheriff and others switching parties from the Democrats to the GOP, lawyers for an Austin police officer in a shooting case asking to present evidence to the grand jury, and the best Christmas destinations in Texas for 2022. As always, if you have questions for our team, DM us on Twitter or email us at editor@thetexan.news. Thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Well, howdy, folks. It's Mackenzie here with Hayden, Brad, Matt, and Rob on our Christmas edition of the Texans podcast. It'll be fairly normal. We'll walk through news stories from this week like usual, and we'll end talking a little bit about Christmas. I'm in Arizona with my family getting ready to celebrate the holiday. I'm so excited to be here. I know y'all are all with your families as well. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. But boys, are you excited for Christmas? Does it feel like Christmas to you?
I mean, since it's December 22nd, yes, it does feel like Christmas.
Oh my gosh. The
look of utter annoyance on Matt's face is something y'all are missing out on being able to see this.
My sister and I have decided to Grinch it up this year because we were supposed to put up all the Christmas stuff before the family gets here, and we have been very lazy and just haven't done that. So we'll see if we do it before tomorrow, but it might not happen.
Gotta get those decorations up like the day after Thanksgiving. That's the best course of action. Well, let's get into the news here so that we can jump on the Christmas train later on. We have lots to get into. Bradley, we're going to start with you. As has become a custom since last year, state officials held a press conference to discuss the ERCOT power grid, particularly as inclement weather approaches. What did they say?
So on Tuesday, Governor Greg Abbott, PUC Chair Peter Lake, and ERCOT CEO Pablo Vegas held a presser, and their main message was that the grid is prepared for the cold temperatures hitting Texas this week. As we're sitting here talking, Matt just said earlier it was around 0 degrees up in the Panhandle and about 6 degrees down in the Rio Grande Valley. Cold weather is hitting everywhere across the country. And what did you say, Matt?
It's 62 in South Texas and 2 degrees.
Oh, wow.
In Panhandle. Yeah. So.
Oh, I misheard you then. Anyway, so cold weather's hitting the state pretty hard this week, and that will naturally lead to higher demand for electricity. More people will be deploying their heaters, and that necessarily implies ramping up the electricity usage. And so the state leaders convened to kind of temper concerns that there may or may not be a blackout. Their message was clear that they are confident that there will not be. The grid is ready and reliable. Lake said, "We expect to have enough generation to meet demand throughout this winter cold snap." They added that retail electric providers and power plants across the state across the ERCOT grid, have postponed maintenance to help cope with the spike in demand that the ERCOT grid will likely see. Friday morning is expected to feature the lowest temperatures. So as people are probably listening to this, or after they are, or before they have, started listening to this, we will have passed through what's probably going to be the tightest period. But they have postponed maintenance to ensure that as much generation as possible is online to meet the demand that we'll see. So on Friday morning, it's expected to have the lowest temperatures and reach the peak demand this week, which is expected to be about 70,000 megawatts. To cope with the the peak demand, they expect to have about 85,000 megawatts in capacity. And so Abbott said that this is another chance for the grid and its operators to earn back the trust of Texans after the 2021 blackouts. This has become kind of a tradition, this worry about another blackout, and understandably so. But to date, since the blackout, there has not been another instance of power going out on a statewide level. If you do see to this point, and likely through this cold snap, if you do experience a power outage, it will probably be due to down power lines from falling branches or ice buildup, things like that. The only power grid you'll know if there's a power grid rolling blackout situation. ERCOT has improved its communications substantially, which were quite terrible during the 2021 episode. But nothing like that is expected this time. And once we get through Friday morning, it should all be, from a power perspective, it should be all clear.
This has become a habit, warnings of blackouts whenever severe weather arrives, but none have occurred since February of last year. What should we expect going forward?
So first, I think you'll see constant concern about potential blackouts anytime it gets abnormally hot or cold. We saw that this summer. We saw that in February earlier this year. But ultimately, the state officials continue to stress how important the market redesign is going forward. The state is losing thermal generation and seeing large amounts of renewables joining the grid. That introduces a lot more variability because of the intermittence of wind and solar. We'll see how those perform this week. But ultimately, what's going on with what we've talked about in previous podcasts about the market redesign, trying to incentivize the construction of more dispatchable generation, that will determine how prepared in the long term the ERCOT power grid is for any weather systems like this that move through and cause a spike in demand. But also, Tex Sledge now wants to say on that, and so we likely will not have a plan settled on until after May of next year at the earliest.
Thank you, Bradley. Hayden, arguably the biggest news story of this week, and just in general, has been the legal back and forth over Title 42. Is the public health order under Title 42 still in place?
For now, Chief Justice John Roberts issued an administrative stay in the legal case over Title 42 this week, virtually at the last minute, as the federal government and the state of Texas prepared for a deluge of illegal immigration. Just as a reminder, Title 42 is the public health order that was invoked at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. It has been used to expel hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants and others who cross the border unlawfully. And it has resulted in increased occurrences of repeat encounters because there are no permanent consequences due to the rapid expulsion instead of going through the normal court process of having someone removed. So this order is still in place for now because Judge Emmett Sullivan, a district judge in D.C., had ordered Biden to stop using the program, and the Biden administration is seeking to stop using the program. But Republican states were seeking injunctions to keep it in place due to fears about a surge of illegal immigration. An appellate court in D.C. had decided that Sullivan's order would stand and that Title 42 would end on Wednesday. But earlier this week, Chief Justice Roberts issued that ruling saying the decision is stayed for now. It is by no means a final resolution to the case. Roberts is just effectively telling everyone to stand down while the Supreme Court considers its options. And Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar, who has been the point person for arguing for Biden's immigration policies at the Supreme Court, asked the Supreme Court in court documents again to allow them to stop using Title 42, contending that these Republican states that are seeking to keep it in place should instead petition Congress for a change in immigration law, and that it is improper for them to continue using this public health order as an immigration policy.
What was some of the reaction to Roberts' decision?
Well, Governor Abbott and Attorney General Paxton did celebrate it. It seemed that they were overselling the victory a little bit because it is really temporary. In fact, even after this decision, Congressman Henry Cuellar made the comment that Title 42 is on the cusp of being ended. So this is by no means a permanent victory for these Republican states led by Texas. But Abbott said that it's a step in that direction of keeping the policy, and Paxton commented that he would do everything within his authority legally to secure the border by pressuring the Biden White House to keep Title 42 and other immigration measures in place and asking for those court injunctions. I want to emphasize that these judges are all in Washington, D.C. These are not Texas state judges or even federal judges in courthouses in Texas making these decisions. This order was issued from Judge Sullivan's courtroom, and he is there in Washington, D.C. And all of this is occurring outside of the state of Texas. All of these decisions are being made in the nation's capital. So next steps are for the Supreme Court to make a decision. It is up to them what happens after today with Title 42. They could at any time lift this stay. They could also send it back to the district court to hash out some of those legal issues. But for now, the Title 42 remains in place, and this pandemic era order is keeping potential illegal immigrants, keeping foreign nationals on the other side of the border, particularly in El Paso, where they are already experiencing a surge of illegal immigration. So this policy is keeping people out of the country for now, but that could end again at any point in the coming days.
Thank you for your coverage, Hayden. We'll keep an eye on it, and we certainly entered the week wondering what would all go down with this. So thanks for continuing to cover that for our readers. Matthew, we are coming to you after a federal judge ruled that Texas cannot prohibit 18 to 20-year-old Texans from carrying handguns. The state appealed the decision, only to do an about-face and withdraw that appeal. What caused this decision, and give us the facts about the case.
So far, the state's been silent on what drove their decision to withdraw the appeal, leaving us to only speculate that the decision is based on Texas voters being very gun-friendly. After federal judge Mark Pittman ruled that Texas laws under the penal code prohibiting adults from under 21 years of age from carrying handguns in most circumstances violated recent Supreme Court precedent, attorneys representing the Department of Public Safety on behalf of the state of Texas appealed the decision to the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, the decision marks one of many rulings that favor gun rights activists after the Supreme Court's New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case earlier this year, where the justices expanded on existing Second Amendment rights precedents and have handed down caused a series of new court rulings at the district trial court level, including this case. Gun rights groups were pretty quick to celebrate the decision of the state to withdraw their appeal, such as the Firearms Policy Coalition and Gun Owners of America.
Well, Matt, awesome, fascinating stuff. Thank you for covering that for our readers. Hayden, we're going back to the border here. As the legal fight over Title 42 continues, Texas and other states won a victory in a case involving another and different Trump-era policy. What was the decision related to the Remain in Mexico policy?
One of the downfalls of having immigration policy being decided in the courts is it is confusing to keep these policies straight because there are multiple policies that implicate whether or not people come over the border. And the Remain in Mexico policy is one that has been to the Supreme Court multiple times. but the Supreme Court previously decided that the federal government could end the Remain in Mexico policy, which was Trump's program that allowed the federal government to keep foreign nationals on the other side of the border while immigration judges considered their asylum claims. Judge Kaczmarek decided most recently that the program and the way it was ended could have violated the Administrative Procedure Act, which are more or less the guardrails around how the federal government governs itself, how it conducts itself and makes its own rules. So Judge Kaczmarek decided that there are more issues to be settled in this case, and that the federal government's decision to terminate the Remain in Mexico policy is not valid. It's fuzzy, however, how this is going to affect the Remain in Mexico policy, because the government had already virtually ended the program after the Supreme Court decided that, gave it the green light to do that. So Judge Kaczmarek's ruling created some confusion in the media, and it is unclear what this means for the Remain in Mexico policy. But for now, again, it is a temporary victory for Texas and other Republican states.
You've been covering this for a long time now. Remind us and give us an overview of some of the background in this case.
Opponents of this policy say that it has created a humanitarian crisis, or that it did, because an estimated 70,000 people were required to wait on the Mexican side of the border, where they were reportedly vulnerable to crime and being deprived of basic necessities. The Biden administration eliminated it almost as soon as Biden was inaugurated. And in February of last year, the federal government began readmitting people who were previously excluded from the country under the program. In August of 2021, the Supreme Court decided that the federal government could not end it. But after, again, the legal football was passed back and forth again, the Supreme Court this summer decided that the federal government could end it. And the definition that the Department of Homeland Security provided at the time it was implemented was, it is a U.S. government program action whereby certain foreign individuals entering or seeking admission to the U.S. from Mexico illegally or without proper documentation may be returned to Mexico and wait outside of the U.S. for the duration of their immigration proceedings, where Mexico will provide them with all appropriate humanitarian protections for the duration of their stay, end quote. And I read that definition because it is not reported a lot, and there are a lot of buzz phrases that are used about this program, but that was its original intention, was to keep people outside of the country while their asylum claims were considered.
Well, thanks for delineating that for us. I know it's easy to get a lot of what's going on, with these immigration policies and these court movements confused. So thank you for breaking that down for us. Bradley, we're going to come to you. Senator Ted Cruz is talking about energy again and made an announcement this week. What did he have to say?
So Senator Ted Cruz announced this week that he forced through the approval of 2 liquefied natural gas export permits by holding hostage 4 Department of Energy nominees. These permits, both with Sempra Energy, which has operations in Texas, but these 2 facilities are on the West Coast, I believe in California. But these permits will allow Texas liquefied natural gas to be shipped to Mexico through the pipeline, and Asia. The part that's shipped to Mexico would just be natural gas through the pipeline, but turned into liquefied natural gas that could then be shipped to Asia, with the goal of growing competition to Russia and China in the region, supplying our allies in Asia rather than them being reliant on Russian natural gas, likely piped through China or directed through China in some fashion. And so a Cruz spokesman said of the development, as a result, American allies and partners in Asia will have access to newer and cleaner alternatives to the coercive energy blackmail pushed by Russia and China. This isn't the first time Cruz has deployed such a maneuver. Back in May, he did the same thing with a couple Department of Energy nominees and secured approval of a couple permits, one of them being a Port Arthur liquefied natural gas export facility. So after that, this facility in Port Arthur is now able to ship LNG to Europe and wherever else people want to buy it from. So the other thing is by allowing these export terminals on the West Coast, it allows this supply to avoid having to be shipped through the Panama Canal, which is costly and congested and time consuming. And so that saves money and will allow a cheaper product to be provided to specific countries in Asia.
Why was this needed in the first place, or seen as needed in the first place?
So the Biden administration is keen on reducing the country's use of fossil fuels. They have a goal to reach a target of 40% emissions reduction relative to 2005 levels by 2030. It's important to note that before the Biden administration even began in January 2021, the country was already halfway to that target, due largely to the replacement of coal with natural gas generation. It is less emissions intensive, in most circumstances more efficient. And so we've just seen this natural switch from coal to natural gas because of the price incentives, because it is generally cheaper in most circumstances. However, we are seeing coal rebounding globally. The International Energy Administration put out a report that expects next year, or at the end of this year, to have seen a 1.2% increase in coal generation across the entire globe. That increase is especially more accentuated in Asia. China, India, Southeast Asia are all deploying coal a lot more because in those areas it's cheaper to use, and they generally are not as concerned about emissions as the U.S. is. And so I saw something pretty interesting in reaction to this from Robert Bryce, he's based in Austin. He's an energy writer. Talked to him before. He is pretty knowledgeable on this subject, and he called this an example of the iron law of electricity. As he describes it, people, businesses, and countries will do whatever they have to do to get the electricity they need. They're not going to stay in the dark. Love it or hate it, coal is here to stay as an energy source, particularly in Asia. It's interesting to see that as the rest of the world, or at least large portions of the rest of the world, transition or rely more on coal than they have before, the U.S. is going the opposite direction, and in large part because of approval of these kinds of projects that Senator Ted Cruz secured. So it's something to watch as it develops over the next years and decades and longer than that. But right now, there's another outlet for Texas natural gas, and that is through these permits to the West Coast and then ultimately to Asia.
Well, Bradley, thanks for your coverage of that issue. Fascinating to see a story that was something we wrote about a while ago kind of resurfaced in this way. So thanks for your coverage. Gentlemen, let's talk about last-minute Christmas shopping really quickly. I know my sister and I were at Costco last night with my family, and it was a complete Tetris game trying to figure out how to get this one DeWalt tool set for my dad through the checkout and purchased. But we didn't have the Costco membership card. So we were trying to figure out how to get it through and do some last minute Christmas shopping for my dad. We figured it out. I will say it ended up being an Amazon purchase, not a Costco purchase, but we did figure it out. I do want to say, if you have last minute Christmas shopping that you need to do, the Texan does have a gift subscription that you can go to our site, thetexan.news, right now and purchase for somebody in your life. We have a lot of folks who listen to the podcast who are so fascinated and interested by Texas politics, and my assumption would be that family members, friends would also appreciate our coverage. So boys, in case you're needed a reminder, go get a last-minute Christmas present for your family. You should just get them a subscription.
Great idea. I'll put that in the stocking.
Thank you. So you can print it off, put it in a card.
Yes.
Like a little picture of your face, like your mugshot, your arms crossed.
My mugshot. Was I arrested?
Yeah, headshot. Oh my gosh.
I was like, this is news.
We should have written about it.
You might have just saved my Christmas, Mackenzie.
Oh, Matt, thank you so much. That is exactly what I like to hear. So, folks, we seriously appreciate you listening to our podcast each and every week, but it is wonderful when folks do go and subscribe at the Texan.news. It is $9 monthly or $7.50 if you purchase an annual subscription. We love being able to report the news each and every week, and subscribers are the method by which we can make sure that we do that each and every week. So thank you for your support. Merry Christmas, and go subscribe to the Texan today.
And for when I do apparently get arrested, it'll help me bail myself out.
That is true. Okay, so we'd already talked about like the Winston Fund to make sure Winston's fed. Now, folks, subscribe and donate to the fund to get Brad out of jail. We'll post bail for him. Hayden, did you have something to add?
Well, I didn't know we were going to have to incorporate bailing Brad out into our Christmas plans, but just know podcasts, we love our podcast listeners, and you're not alone if you're still Christmas shopping. I just finished my shopping up last night. I was feeling better because I looked around me at Target and saw all the other procrastinators. It made me feel better. So we're here to help you out. If you need a last minute Christmas gift, go to the Texan.news and purchase that gift subscription. I know I have gifted people subscriptions, or I have recommended gift subscriptions to people before, and they've taken advantage of that. It's a great option. So make sure you go to the Texan.news and take advantage of that in these last few days before Christmas.
We obviously there's no shipping involved, which is a big deal. Last night, my brother saw, like, we have an app where you can list the things you want on your Christmas list, and nothing on my dad's list had been. I hope he does not listen to this podcast. This will give away his entire Christmas gift. But none of the items on his list had been purchased. And my brother goes, well, I hope whoever has, because we draw names, I hope whoever has dad has their own plans this year, because nothing on his list has been purchased. And my sister and I, who have him, just started like sweating. We were like, thanks for the reminder, bro. So all that to say, shipping is not a part of the equation here. You can get it immediately. It goes straight to your inbox and you can give it to somebody. So a great option for you this Christmas. Wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you for that. Hayden, we are going to chat with you again. My gosh, illegal immigration, once again, bless your soul. This is like 70% of your workload. Many on the right have called illegal immigration an invasion and asked Governor Abbott to treat it as such. What did Senator Cornyn have to say on the topic, and did it mirror what a lot of other Republicans have been saying?
He did reportedly comment on this in a conference call with reporters. He pushed back on the characterization of illegal immigration as an invasion. He said, quote, I realize different people have used different terms to describe what's happening at the border. I would prefer to call it a humanitarian, public safety, and public health crisis. I think the word invasion brings up some other connotations, which I don't think really apply here. And Cornyn's not the only one who's brought up that objection. There have been those who say that it evokes wartime images that do not apply to groups of poor, desperate people trying to seek asylum at the southern border. Of course, mixed into those groups of people could be those who have nefarious intentions, and there are people on the terrorist watch list who have been apprehended after crossing the border illegally. So it would be intellectually dishonest for anyone to claim that everyone coming across the border is seeking asylum for legitimate reasons. But it is true that Cornyn and others have questioned calling it an invasion and treating it like a warfare type situation.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of what our gripe with mainstream media is a lot of the generalizations that are made. There's so much nuance in all of these issues, regardless of your political persuasion. So, Hayden, we appreciate that. Have other Republicans taken issue with this invasion characterization?
Governor Abbott and Attorney General Ken Paxton have said that there are problems with this strategy. So it is not just Cornyn who is pushing back on this. Cornyn has, I won't say caused dust-ups, but remarks he has made. He has positions he's taken this year have caused frustration among some strong conservatives who particularly objected to his support of the appropriations bill this summer that contains some limited gun control measures. And there are those who took issue with Cornyn's statements as well. Governor Abbott has said before that he fears the federal government could prosecute state police and National Guardsmen if this strategy is employed. And Attorney General Paxton has said that the federal government could easily take control of the National Guard in a scenario where the state is trying to deport illegal immigrants or do the Fed's job for them. So Cornyn's not the only one who has pushed back on this, even if it is for slightly different reasons.
Certainly. Thank you, Hayden, for your coverage. Let's pivot to talking about the legislative session. Does anybody know how many days it is until the legislative session? It's January 10th. We don't have very many days. It's like 3 weeks or something. I don't know. I can't do the math quickly enough. Regardless, let's pivot to talking about what Hayden?
All right, it's 19 days from today. When this podcast drops, it won't be 19 days.
It'll be 18, I think.
Yeah, as we're recording this, it's 19 days.
Oh my goodness. Everyone prepare, buckle your seatbelts. Here we go. Bradley, GOP state legislators have already filed a half a dozen or so bills concerning child gender modification. It's been a very hot topic nationally and specifically in Texas for the last several years. Another proposal was filed this week. Tell us about it.
So there have already been a few that were filed to outright ban the practice for children. This takes a bit of a different approach. State Rep Brian Harrison announced the filing of a state take on the federal Hyde Amendment. Since the 70s, the Hyde Amendment has prohibited the use of tax dollars for abortion services. Harrison's bill would do the same at the state level, but for gender modification procedures, and that's all of them, I believe. At least reading the text of his bill, it would indicate that. And not just on children. But he said in a statement, irrespective of how anyone views these procedures, it should be uncontroversial that tax money should not fund them. There have been certain stories of, somebody in prison wanting to go through this surgery. And I don't think this happened in Texas, but some suing whatever state they were in to finance that surgery. And so this is a way to kind of prevent that from happening. The bill does provide an exemption for those deemed intersex, which is a term for people born with sexual characteristics of both sexes. There's a lot of debates on how many people meet that classification. And you'll hear this stat put out a lot. 1.7% of the U.S. population had intersex traits. That comes from a report in around the turn of the century by Brown University professor Ann Fausto Sterling that estimated 1.7% of the U.S. population had intersex traits. Now, at that time, that would amount to 4.8 million people as of the year 2000. 2 years later, this figure was strongly objected to by Leonard Sachs, a psychologist and family physician, saying that it is actually closer to 0.018%. That's a huge difference. That would amount to about 50,000 people in 2002. He said that many reviewers of this statistic are not aware that this figure includes conditions which most clinicians do not recognize as intersex, such as Klinefelter syndrome, Turner syndrome, and late onset adrenal hyperplasia. I think I pronounced that correctly. Regardless, there's differing opinions on how many people this would actually apply to, but that exemption is in the bill. I assume to prevent that objection from derailing the bill itself. So that's the general details, and we'll see if it can pass next session.
Thank you, Bradley. Let's talk about another proposal. Hayden, a state senator, filed legislation this week as part of his response to the Robb Elementary School shooting. What is the basis for his bill?
Senator Roland Gutierrez, a San Antonio Democrat, went to, in a media appearance, he said that he would file legislation to require active shooter training for active shooter scenarios for all law enforcement in Texas. He highlighted the fact that it is only required for those who work in a school. It is not currently required for everyone who has a peace officer license in Texas. And he contended that it is an obvious, that was the word he used, obvious step to take to reduce the risk of future shootings and the severity of those shootings. He has continually criticized the lack of coordination by the nearly 400 law enforcement officers who were on scene at the Robb Elementary School shooting in May, and the 77-minute delay before the 18-year-old gunman was confronted. And the law enforcement response has been pretty well universally criticized.
Certainly. And it is his district that he's talking about here. He represents Uvalde. Is he the only? He might be the only senator who represents that area. I'm unsure specifically, but I believe that is the case. So he's filing these pieces of legislation as they hit very close to home. What are some other steps that the senator has proposed to respond to the shooting?
The text of the bill that he announced is not available quite yet, but other bills that he has filed are available for people to read, and that includes the Uvalde Victims Compensation Fund, which would provide hundreds of millions for those directly impacted by the shooting. He has also said that he believes there should be a prohibition on AR-style semi-automatic rifles, and he made those comments and testimony in the House Judiciary Committee in Congress in Washington, D.C. He has called for other gun control measures, such as an age restriction on purchasing semi-automatic rifles or handguns. And he has said that he will commit his session to responding to the Robb Elementary School shooting and seeking compensation for those impacted.
Thank you for your coverage, Hayden, as always. Bradley, an incoming legislator, made national waves for a bill he's filed next session, focused specifically on higher education. Very topical considering the last year or two of news. What's it all about?
So State Rep-elect Carl Tepper from Lubbock has filed a bill to prohibit diversity, equity, and inclusion offices on university campuses. It commands universities to, quote, demonstrate a commitment to intellectual freedom and viewpoint diversity. One interesting thing about it is it sets forth a civil cause of action mechanism similar to the Texas Heartbeat Act's feature that allows individuals to bring civil suit against institutions that violate this law. We've seen this become more and more of a trend in these state laws, at least ones that I've seen filed for next session, taking that civil cause of action and applying it to different situations. This is one of those. Tepper said, he told me the reason that he filed this bill is that these offices have been out of control for a while now, and people are getting really frustrated with them when it comes to public dollars. I think it's pretty clear that we must be viewpoint neutral. Broadly, the criticism of these DEI offices is that they advance a certain perspective and viewpoint, and without giving much credence to differing opinions, and specifically focusing on the more of the progressive mindset. And they've gotten a lot of criticism for, as some have described it, indoctrinating students. They have a lot of cultural influence within these universities. Many of them do. As we see with similar offices in corporations and other institutions. And so there's a lot of pushback, especially on the right, against these kinds of establishments, and equal criticism from the left for efforts like Tepper's to kind of neuter these offices. The Texas Legislative Black Caucus, its chair, Ron Reynolds, criticized the bill in a statement this week, saying this session should not be focused on providing students let me start that quote over. He said, "This session should be focused on providing students more resources, not taking them away. Diversity, equity, inclusion offices in their themes are essential to continue cultivating environments where all students and faculty feel represented and supported." This is, I think, part of a larger recoil against these ideals in higher education and in kind of the political direction that these universities have taken. And we see, a proposal from Lieutenant Governor Patrick to phase out tenure for professors that have been found to be teaching critical race theory or critical race theory imbued themes. And so I think this is going to be part of a larger issue next session. How does the GOP heavy conservative leaning state legislature, how do they approach these higher education institutions that pull in a lot of tax dollars and then are often quite left leaning in their policies that we see play out? So I'd recommend following this bill. I'll be following it through session, and it's interesting to see something I think could get a lot of support among the legislature, especially Republicans, being filed by somebody new. This is something that I think absolutely has the chance to get across the finish line, at least in some form, and that would be, a pretty big lift for an incoming freshman legislator. But Tepper is jumping on that, and he said he has gotten a lot of good feedback, especially from legislators on it. So, in short, we'll see.
Thank you, Bradley. Hayden, let's pivot nationally. Give us a 10,000-foot view of the omnibus bill being considered in Congress.
Federal lawmakers are facing a deadline on Friday, so the day this podcast drops, to pass legislation to continue funding for the federal government before the end of the year. And this process has been criticized by many people who are taking a look at this 4,200-page document that is more or less being thrown together at the 11th hour. The document includes funding to the tune of $858 billion for defense and $773 billion for non-defense discretionary spending. It is a total price tag of $1.7 trillion, and lawmakers are considering this just days before the Christmas holiday, and they are being asked to pass this 4,200-page document again by the end of Friday.
Wow, quite something. What were the objections to the border security provisions?
Well, there was funding set aside for border security, but some Republicans highlighted that the $340 million for ICE and $1.6 billion for Customs and Border Protection had a note in the legislation that excluded its spending on programs, quote, to acquire, maintain, or extend border security technology and capabilities, except for technology and capabilities to improve Border Patrol processing, end quote. And it may seem like border security is border security, but there is a difference between securing the border and trying to deter illegal immigration and simply improving Border Patrol's ability to process cases of people coming across the border. So even if they're adding 125 Customs and Border Protection officers, which is what this bill would do, according to Chris Murphy, who's the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee's Subcommittee on Homeland Security, it would still designate those resources for processing people coming across the border, not keeping them from crossing the border in the first place. Murphy and others are calling it a reasonable compromise, but voices such as Congressman Dan Bishop in North Carolina, Congressman Troy Nehls here in Texas, Chip Roy, are saying that this bill, because of the language, prohibits Border Patrol funding from being used to to indeed secure the border. And this is amid a record number of illegal crossings. So Republicans are objecting to this funding being set aside for, quote, non-detention border management instead of deterring or expelling people from the country. And it is notable that the bill includes $410 million for border security in Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Tunis, and a few other countries that I can't pronounce, unfortunately. So there are portions of this bill that are offensive to Republicans. John Cornyn voted in favor of it, but he voted in favor of it only reluctantly. And he said it is a flawed, broken process, was the phrase he used to describe the process that led up to the bill's proposal.
Thank you for your coverage, Hayden. Matt, we're coming to you. The November elections are now long over, and yet the GOP here in Texas is celebrating a win in a local elected office. Tell us more about this South Texas story.
Karnes County Sheriff Dwayne Villanueva announced in a press release from the Republican Party of Texas that he's leaving the Democrat Party and becoming a Republican, saying, "I look forward to continuing the strong tradition of excellent law enforcement in Karnes County, which requires us to come together for a common cause and seek out leaders of integrity and merit." The move was also celebrated by state GOP chairman Matt Rinaldi, who boasted about having another high-profile elected official change parties to the GOP under his tenure as state party chair, including State Representative Ryan Jeline, another South Texas Democrat who notably switched to the GOP earlier this year.
Have there been other local officials that have switched parties?
Yeah, so Sheriff Villanueva isn't alone in county officials who've also recently switched. This past election cycle, Terrell County Judge Dale Carruthers switched parties from Democrat to Republican and was endorsed by her in her reelection bid by Governor Greg Abbott, and ultimately won reelection this past November. As well as Presidio County Judge Cinderella Guevara. She also made the switch to the GOP. However, since her county is heavily Democratic, it's a bit of a Democratic stronghold in Southwest Texas, she did not gain re-election in November and was ultimately defeated by Democrat nominee Joe Portillo Jr.
Spicy stuff. Thank you, Matthew. Bradley, 2 Austin attorneys for multiple accused police officers have grappled frequently with the Travis County DA, Jose Garza. What happened this week as an update on that story?
So the attorneys for Officer Luis Serrato, who is under investigation for a shooting that occurred in January 2021, released an open letter to Jose Garza this week asking for the ability to present testimony and potential evidence to the grand jury that convened this week. Garza presented evidence to the grand jury seeking an indictment against Serrato for undisclosed charges, at least as far as I'm aware, for shooting and killing a man last year. In Texas, and I think probably in the rest of the country as well, or at least most of the rest of the country, DAs possess sole discretion over what evidence and testimony may be presented to the grand jury. And he may permit opposing counsel to present as well, but that's also up to his discretion. So these 2 attorneys, Ken Irvin and Doug O'Connell, who represent Serrato, along with multiple other Austin police officers, including about 8 of them who were indicted for firing less lethal beanbag rounds during the 2020 protests turned riots that we've talked about before. They requested that they be allowed to present evidence. It didn't sound like, at least at the time and since, that they've been allowed that. But they kind of put this letter out in an effort to drum up some public support for them, and some, hopefully in their eyes, some pushback for Garza, who has made prosecuting police officers a feature of his tenure since taking over, since winning the election in 2020. This, along with encouraging laxer bail policy for offenders deemed indigent, has been kind of the two-pronged features of Garza's tenure so far. And it's just continuing to roll out as more and more, as Garza seeks more indictments against officers for various incidents.
Certainly. Thank you, Bradley. Okay, we are going to end this pod as far as stories go, talking about a Christmas story from Matt. Matt, you wrote highlighting a few of our favorite holiday destinations across Texas for readers who want to get the ultimate Christmas experience. So let's talk a little bit about those places you highlighted in the story. There were 3 different tiers of towns that you talked about, experiences. What was the first tier called again? You had a great name for it.
Well, we identified a few Texas Christmas Titan towns.
Yes, Titans. That's right. So good. So give us like an example of a Texas Christmas Titan.
Well, one of my favorites is Fredericksburg. A lot of people,
Classic.
both out of state, in state, know that Fredericksburg is pretty much all year round a travel destination. But at Christmas time, they really know how to celebrate, and the entire town gets very dressed up, and it's frequently described as one of those Hallmark style movie Christmas towns. So much to do there. They have an interesting city park with all kinds of displays and things to do, and just tons of shopping. And they do it so well that it just manages to keep and retain its place amongst the Christmas Titans. Other ones, of course, the Riverwalk at San Antonio. That is a pretty magical annual experience with just so many Christmas lights decorating the Riverwalk. Once again, it's a pretty continuous tourist attraction, but they really know how to put on the celebration and spice things up with a lot of holiday-oriented events and things like that. And for a lot of these towns and cities that we're talking about, you can usually go find their visitor bureaus, chambers of commerce, and they have events and things like that going along with their holiday celebrations. The other Christmas Titan that we talked about is actually the city of Grapevine. Up there, you have at the Gaylord Texan Hotel and Resort, they have some 2 million pounds of carved ice. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's really, really cool. They literally have ice sleds that you can go down, and just tons of events from their ice carvings to the displays inside the hotel, plus the town generally. They have a considerable number of attractions, such as the North Pole Express train, where families can put on their Christmas pajamas and ride with Mrs. Claus aboard a vintage 1920s coach train. And then we have a category of honorable mentions of iconic Texas Christmas events. Something that we actually highlighted in previous years with an article is the small West Texas town of Anson, hosting what is now famously known as the Cowboy Christmas Ball. Now, the history of the ball started in the late 1800s, and a poet wrote a poem, and then it really became famous whenever country singer Michael Martin Murphey put the poem to music, and it became a very popular Texas Christmas song. And once a year, every year, and for 2 days there in Anson in the first week of December, they still celebrate the Cowboy Christmas Ball. Michael Martin Murphey still headlines the first event, and then they usually have somebody else on the second day of the event. But it's a really cool, historic, doesn't get any more Texas Christmas than the Cowboy Christmas Ball. Another interesting annual event is down on the Texas coast in Galveston with the Dickens on the Strand event, which is a pretty interesting event where if you want to get the Victorian era Charles Dickens experience, they put on a festival every year where people dress up in period reenactment costumes and hold all kinds of events that are themed along the Charles Dickens novel styles. And so we wanted to kind of highlight those two uniquely Texas events that occur every year. And then we also just wanted to highlight a few fun ideas that we felt stood out to us as we looked around the state. A lot of communities have a lot of Christmas stuff going. This is by no means the complete list of Christmas things to do across the state, but a few that stuck out to us was the Christmas State Railroad near Palestine, where they run the Polar Express train, just like in the movie. You can go get tickets for that, and the families can ride the genuine Polar Express steam train.
My literal dream is to ride the Polar Express train. So I
could see your eyes get all big as I started talking about that. So it's something you're going to definitely have to put on your schedule to do. A couple of other interesting events is the Texas Christmas Market in Arlington. Features a variety of Christmas-themed theaters that have provided unique holiday shopping experience since 2011. And that market runs until, it's open now until tomorrow is the last day of it, which would be December 23rd. Lastly, Starbright Village in Odessa is an annual drive-through holiday experience featuring over 300,000 lighted displays in McKinney Park. Families can go drive through all of the displays. I actually drove past it last night. It's a very impressive display of lights, and there are a few dates still available, I believe, for families to get to actually go meet Santa Claus at the park.
My other dream, obviously. This sounds incredible. And folks, it's a great story worth reading. We published it very first thing this week, so make sure to go read it if you're looking for something fun to do this weekend and you live or are near any of those places we mentioned. Some really great ideas for family fun and just festive experiences and activities. So Matt, thanks for your coverage of that. We're going to totally skip Tweetery this week because I want to talk about some fun things. One, is there anything specifically that you guys are very excited about eating for Christmas? Like, Christmas is here, your families are together. Is there something that you're like, oh gosh, it's on the menu, you do it every year, or even if it's just on the menu this year, that you're excited to eat? I'll start. Not that I have any idea or anything on my mind specifically, but I totally do. We always make these eggnog thumbprint cookies that are so good. Like, there's a little filling that you put in a dollop in the middle of the cookie. They're coated with walnuts, which Brad would unfortunately explode if he was able to partake in this, but they're delicious, and we make them every year. It's just a sweet little Christmas tradition, and we make it like the week before Christmas is kind of what our family does.
That sounds fun.
I just
eating
like the
process.
Wait, I didn't hear either of you. What did you say, Hayden?
I said that sounds fun, not just the treat, but also the process of making them.
It is. It's quite fun. And what about you, Matt?
I just like pie.
Pie? What kind of pie?
Well, I have two favorite kinds of pie, actually. Hot pie and cold pie.
Okay.
What? That's what?
All of y'all.
Like, are you talking about like apple pie, which you heat up, and like pumpkin pie, which you would not?
It's just.
I got the joke, Matt. Don't worry.
It's a joke.
So that joke actually comes down through my family. My great-grandfather, that was his favorite saying at the holidays whenever that conversation would come up. What's your favorite kind of pie? Well, I have two favorite kind of favorites. And he just couldn't wait to be asked it. So
Basically all kinds of pie.
If it's pie, he loved it. And I do too.
That's awesome. It runs in the Stringer family. I love it. What about you, Brad?
Well,
I assume you'd love a good bite of pecan pie.
Yeah, that would not go over well. I like Christmas cookies.
Like the sugar cookies that you frost?
Yes. My grandma makes very good frosted sugar cookies, along with various other kinds. Lemon bars are very good, or some of my favorites. As far as general food, we just had, normally whenever we go to my mom's side, we always have Italian food, spaghetti. That side of the family is Italian, so it's quite good. It's not just Prego out of a jar. So we had that last night, and that was quite good. I always look forward to that. I mean, pie is good too. I don't prefer pumpkin pie, but apple's fine, I suppose. Is that the riveting commentary you were looking for?
Literally the most lackluster food.
I can certainly spice it up a little with my family.
Rob, save us, Rob.
Yeah, so my dad's side of the family is from Lithuania, so we like to do a Lithuanian Christmas dinner called kūčias, and the whole idea is you serve 12 dishes. I believe it's for each of the 12 apostles, and you serve dishes with no meat. So it's mostly fish based. So I'm looking forward to traditional Christmas foods like lox and pickled herring and all sorts of good stuff like that on our Christmas dinner table. It's very fish based.
Yes, the traditional Christmas meal there.
They all do like figgy pudding and
we'll be going to like a Russian store in our area to pick up like good imported like black bread, like the kind of Eastern European. You just smother it with butter and fish. It's fantastic.
Rob, I feel like you're a super fan of fruitcake.
I'm not a super fan of fruitcake. Honestly, we're not going to have fruitcake. We're not going to have fruitcake at our Christmas. We're going to have cheesecake, and I'm not joking.
Have y'all ever had the
cheesecake's a real thing?
From that place in what is that place called? It's the famous fruitcake place here in Texas.
Collins Street Bakery.
Collins Street Bakery, yes. Yeah, have y'all ever had one of those?
No, but I avoid fruitcake. It's not my thing.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not a fruitcake person, but I am a big
understanding is that fruitcake is just an abomination in every respect. So that's kind of what they go off.
I'm not crazy about fruitcakes, but they make this other kind of cake that's actually pretty good that I think just has cherries on it. I can't remember exactly. It's been a long time.
Well, interesting. Like, I'm not quite sure, Rob, is this like, I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. Did you, like, each year, do you genuinely look forward to this meal? Like the festivity, have you had it enough growing up where it's something you really enjoy? Like what do your taste buds do when you have this kind of food? Like it's hard for me to picture because I just have never experienced traditional Lithuanian food.
Well, we don't really eat, I guess, traditional Lithuanian food. Traditional Lithuanian food is very interesting to American palates, I think. So we don't exactly go for specifically Lithuanian foods, but the whole idea is you're supposed to have meatless dishes. So it's a lot of fish. So, I'm a big fan of seafood, so it works great for me. I like lox. I like pickled herring. I like herring and wine. There's a lot of good ways to do herring.
What is a lox?
Lox, salmon.
Oh, okay. I like salmon too.
Yeah, salmon's good, especially a cured salmon. It's very delicious.
Oof. Now I'm starting to get hungry. That I could definitely get on board with.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, this is kind of an odd transition, but I'm gonna do my best to bridge it here. Earlier, when I errantly called Brad's headshot a mugshot, it got me thinking, what crime, if I were to call y'all and say, hey guys, I'm in jail for X crime, what crime would it be that would not be surprising for you? And for each of us, like we kind of have to think through what would be. Hayden called me from the bowels of the Travis County Jail and said, Hayden is dying laughing and he's muted himself and he's leaning back in his chair. I'm so angry we cannot hear him. But what would it be that
the crime for each of us that would be potentially like the least surprising call to get?
Well, based on your earlier comments, Mac, I think it would be stealing a drill set from Costco because you didn't have a Costco membership.
That's probably true.
I think for Mac, it would be like Christmas caroling on private property and was asked to leave and didn't.
I just think it's
She just had way too much spirit.
I just think it's funny that Mackenzie thinks that she would be the one who I would call if I was like, I know I'm going to call my boss. That's a great person to call if I'm in jail.
You know that I put you down on my health insurance in case I need help. That you're the person they're going to notify.
So I'm going to be in the back of the ambulance with you, comforting you as you take your dying breath.
Yeah, I mean, I have to give you when the new year starts the document. I'm giving you power of attorney. So.
Oh man, those are pretty good. I enjoy that. I think Brad, I would be 100% not surprised if I were to receive a call that Brad had been at the Michigan-Ohio game and had gotten into a fist fight with some Ohio fan. And it would have probably been over something incredibly benign, like the color of the jerseys or something. And Brad, if he had like 1.5 years, would be susceptible to, I think, getting in some sort of verbal altercation. Brad would not be the first one to throw a punch, but if somebody threw a punch at Brad, because Brad would be spitting insults and like going after this person, dressing him down with his words.
I don't think that's accurate.
I would literally not be surprised if somebody engaged him in a fist fight and then Brad was like, bring it on.
I grew up in Ohio. I had to get along with Ohio State fans.
I know.
I think you're missing the mark here. I think I'd be more likely to end up in jail reenacting the Santa Claus bank robbery from Texas. That every year, instead of visions of sugar plums dancing in my head, it's visions of reenacting the Santa Claus robbery, only doing it more effectively because it didn't end up well for him. So
interesting.
Yes.
Okay, well, that is a good plug for a story at the Texan. Make sure to go to the Texan.news and read all about the Santa bank robbery story. It is crazy. Also, one year we were considering for our Christmas podcast, just having me read that story as like a fun Christmas thing. But it's a kind of a gruesome story, and we were like, "This is not good." Just do a fun Christmas podcast. So we didn't do it, but that was a consideration. It's a fascinating story. I think Daniel wrote it back when he was still recording, but I'm trying to think of what Matt, here's what I think Matt would do. Matt would errantly be arrested for just investigating something too much. And he does have licensing and a lot of experience to make sure that he is a very legitimate actor in that.
Yeah, I can't go to jail for stalking. I am a private investigator. So
wait, really? That's a thing?
Huh?
That seems a bit extreme. You're exempt from an entire section of the penal code because you have a license? That can't be right.
I'd probably go to jail for sitting on a park bench reading a newspaper with 2 eye holes cut in it while I'm watching somebody. And they'd be like, "Sir, what are you doing here?" And then I'd look for my license, and I left it at the house or something.
Probably you'd be wearing your big fedora and trench coat and everything. So you'd be like, "Hold on, I got it in one of these pockets." And after about 30 minutes, they just bring you in anyway.
Pretty much.
Y'all talking about having your boss as an emergency contact reminds me of an Isaiah story, but I won't tell on this podcast. It's not bad, but I just don't want to do it. But it reminds me of a very specific Isaiah story back when he was here. So,
I think I know which story you're referring to.
The fact that there are potentially multiple that you could be thinking of and you think you know which one I'm talking about is also very funny.
It is a multiple choice scenario.
Good old Isaiah. What about Rob? Rob would be arrested for putting pickled herring on someone's front lawn as revenge.
I wouldn't do that as somebody to revenge. That would be a gift. Pickled herring is way too delicious to waste on petty things like revenge.
Fair. But your sheer size, you putting anything on someone's lawn, even if it were to be a gift.
I'd probably be arrested for, eating an all-you-can-eat buffet into bankruptcy, and I'd refuse to leave because I'd be like, I paid my ticket here, and they'd have to eventually call the cops and get me out.
That's true. That's very true. Brad, what do you have to say about that?
I want to amend my earlier comments about what you'd be arrested for. I was just watching Elf the other night, and when Buddy got arrested for attacking the Santa because it was a fraudulent Santa, I think
my favorite scene.
I would think that would be
a throne of lies.
yeah. But she would do it because the Santa Claus was not sufficiently spirited, was not sufficiently jolly, and then she would, throw a couple haymakers and get put in the jail cell for the night.
I would just be fascinated to see if I could even throw a haymaker. If I even have the muscle mass or the athletic ability to throw a haymaker. I don't think that's my thing.
Just swing his bag of gifts.
What about Hayden, guys? What would Hayden be arrested for?
I was going to say, no one's been able to think of a crime that I might commit, so I must be the most law-abiding citizen on the team.
So I think that's without question, you're the most law-abiding citizen of us all. And I think I'm pretty law-abiding, so that says something. Oh, man, what would Hayden... I'm trying to think.
I'm not going to bail you out of this predicament. Sorry. No pun intended.
Oh, violating a Good Samaritan law, as he just said, right? He would walk right by. I'm not going to help you out. I'm not going to bail you out on this. He's been reinforcing that this whole time. It'll be like the Seinfeld ending, where they don't do the Good Samaritan law. I don't know.
Yes, that.
I think we should do something. I'm trying to think.
Man, they're really not going to let me off the hook, guys. They're really trying hard to think of something.
Yeah. Well, everyone's got to get there. You were off the hook for the Christmas food debacle. So
why'd you have to go and tell on me? I discreetly bowed out of that conversation because I couldn't think of a good answer. And then you were like, Hayden was off the hook during the culinary conversation.
No, here's what Hayden would get into a fight over Robert's Rules of Orders. And he would be at a bar, had a couple too many beers, as in like 1.5 beers, and then we'd get into a spirited discussion over Robert's Rules of Order, and somebody would have something wrong, and Hayden would,
Yeah, I would be blacked out drunk on 1.5 Lone Stars, and then someone would say beg the question instead of raise the question, and I would just completely handle it.
Okay, here's a legit question related to this. If you did get arrested, would you smile in your mugshot or be straight-faced?
I would be unable to stop myself from smiling at my mugshot. Like, I'd try to have a serious face and I wouldn't be able to.
I would be torn because on one hand, you don't want to look like you're not taking it seriously. But on the other hand, you might want to smile to make yourself look nice and friendly. So when they put your mugshot on the 10 o'clock news, people don't think of you as a hardened criminal.
I'd probably do some kind of really stupid smile, like a big toothy grin, and then have the cop smack me upside the head for not taking it seriously.
You want to do a pose like a Rick Perry mugshot where it just looks so good they don't want to share it. It just looks so good, it doesn't do the news stories any good, attacking him with the mugshot.
Rick Perry did smile in his mugshot, but it was subtle. It was more of a smirk than a smile. And of course, nothing ever came of that criminal case.
Not that I even think Rick Perry looked smug, but you don't want to look smug in your mugshot also. And that would be a concern.
Then it would be a smug shot.
Oh, Lord.
All right, that's it.
Brad's off. Okay, I did have an amendment to Brad's getting arrested story. I think Brad could get arrested. Like, the reason's not important, but potentially a police officer would come to Brad and say, here's what you violated. And Brad would go into debate mode and probably have like grounds on which to stand of saying, hey, you have this wrong. The interpretation's wrong. Here's this court precedent. This is ridiculous. And he would like be belligerently debating this officer to the point where he's resisting arrest. And that's why he would get arrested.
Arguing with the police.
Yeah.
You got a warrant for that?
Yeah, can I search your vehicle? No.
Exactly. Okay, folks. Well, we've so enjoyed chatting with you this Christmas season. Thanks for joining. Next week, we'll have a New Year's edition of the Texans podcast where we take a look back at 2022 and a look forward at 2023, talk through the biggest stories of the year and what we expect going forward. We so appreciate you listening to us. Merry Christmas and enjoy the holiday season.
Thank you to everyone for listening. If you enjoy our show, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want more of our stories, subscribe to The Texan at thetexan.news. Follow us on social media for the latest in Texas politics, and send any questions for our team to our mailbag by DMing us on Twitter or shooting an email to editor@thetexan.news. We are funded entirely by readers and listeners like you, so thank you again for your support. Tune in next week for another episode of our weekly Roundup. God bless you, and God bless Texas.